Hello everybody and welcome back to the main stage at Event Tech Live USA and Canada 2020, and welcome to our good friend Mr. Matt Coyne. Matt is the founder and connector of people, spaces and technology at finalist in the Event Tech Startup Competition, Twigged. Matt, welcome to Event Tech Live.
Thank you very much, James. Good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. I know you've got lots to get through in your session today, breaking free from data silos. So I'm going to hand over to you to introduce your guests. I know that you'll be keeping an eye on Glitter, but I'll also be coming back a little bit later on to go through any questions and comments that our audience have for you today. Over to you, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you very much, James. And good morning or good afternoon from wherever you're dialing in. As you said, my name is Matt Coyne, founder of Twigged, and I am joined by Dr. Baris Onay of Precision Communities. Hi, Baris. And Sophie Holt
Hello.
from Explori. So we do have quite a lot to get through because, I mean, data is quite an interesting subject and there's so many levels we can go through. But if I can start with Baris, if I could start with you, you're behind a new not-for-profit initiative called VSEF, and it's very relevant to today's conversation. So could you give us a little bit of an overview of what that is, please?
Well, it would be an overstatement to say that I'm behind VSEF, but I'm involved in VSEF, let's say.
Involved.
VSEF is, it stands for the version standard export format. It is an open source data sharing format that we are trying to promote for virtual events. Because, you know, we've always, as organizers, we've been complaining about the lack of many touch points with our customer base, and therefore the amount of data generated being very cyclical and very little for us to become data-led companies. And now with the silver lining and everything that we had over the last 2 years has been that with virtual events now, that is no longer a problem. We live in an abundance of data, of interactions from visitors, exhibitors, visitors to visitors, and if you do your job right, all that data must be flowing to you. Now, there is a catch, though, that most medium-sized or even big, larger organizations use more than one digital platform to fulfill their needs. And the study that we've done, actually, Sophie's led, has been that I think that number sits at 4.3 per organizer. So that means every organizer utilizing 4 or 5 different platforms for different types of events in the virtual sphere. This means the same data set, types of data, let's say visitor name, surname, is there a middle name or not? We don't know, yeah? Because there's no standard that we can all work towards. And that means the same data being handed back, if it is handed back, to the organizer in 4 or 5 different formats, and then it becomes a huge mess at the organizer end to make really sense out of it. And VSEF has been founded by a group of organizers and founding platforms and associations that are backing it to start to be the nucleus of the start of a new industry standard format that might become a remedy to this problem.
That's awesome. Thanks, Baris. And I think I kind of wanted to set the scene with that because that's what we're talking about through the whole day, through the whole session. Gosh, not all day on data. I couldn't do that. But so talking about breaking free from data silos and the benefits of reviewing customer journey, making the data work for you better and creating better experiences. Now, Sophie, if you've seen her present before, not only is she very eloquent in her responses, she loves a buzzword. So if you are playing buzzword bingo at ETL, this may be a bit of a bonus round for you because there will be a few that you can tick off today. So then setting the scene on the subject of data, and your first ding, ding, ding for buzzwords. But Sophie, we were talking about active or dynamic data versus static data. So what does that mean? And maybe give us a little bit of a definition, if you could.
So I think this probably is, it could mean different things in different contexts, but the context we're talking about of events, you've got some data that's fixed. So when you collect it, That could be the date of the event, the venue, the names of the companies that sponsor. That's all fixed, you collect it once. But then there's data that's going to change whilst the event itself evolves. And that could be dwell time, participation in sessions, number of connections, number of meetings. All of that will evolve during the event. So that's dynamic data in this context. And it's worth thinking about how you're going to work with both types of data.
Yeah, and I think then maybe the next point to you, Baris, is where is this data coming from? You know, we've got some of the static, but where are we getting this data?
The thing is, before doing virtual, the data would come from your website, and that will be your registration, maybe registration provider or your own registration solution, depending on what you're doing. And if you do your job really well, then that might be, let's say, spilling over with the same identity into what people are reading on your website. But I would say that will be like 5% of organizers out there, or 2% of organizers out there who do that. So the data will be coming from these digital interactions that people might have with your platform. I always say, if you do your job well or you do your job right, because the thing is, you might not be doing it unknowingly in a degree that doesn't allow you to knit any of this data together to start with. So the data might not be coming at all at the let's say, virtual world. But with the virtual world, the data around your website and your platform, that's still something that needs to be tied together. But what happens on the platforms that we know, that we work with day-to-day basis, they do their job right, because they're data companies, yeah, they're digital companies. And they can give you, if you ask them the right questions, the very intricate relationships between the people and the other objects, such as products in the system or exhibitors in the system. So there's an abundance of data you could actually harvest. But the real trick is connecting the different sources of data. And that might be your website, your social, your CRM, some post-show survey you're doing, and the active platform you're using. So you need a data transportability, let's say, a solution or engineering in place, so that the different sources of data that might be out there for you can be knitted together into a big story.
And I think it's a really important part of mapping that entire journey, isn't it? That it's kind of not just traditional from see my website, register, and then, you know, mark it and go to the event. Like we have got to look at the entire journey and all of those sort of touch points that come along. So, you know, that could also be the content platforms, right? The ones, you know, post-event that are delivering that more personalized content. So then I think this is relevant to the next point. And again, buzzword bingo, please get your pens and markers ready. But Sophie, this term is actually more commonly known perhaps, but about omnichannel. And you talked about some research one of your clients was doing into the retail sector last year. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what they found and what came back from, you know, mapping events versus retail, for example.
So we were working with one of Emerald's brands to conduct a piece of actually market-facing research. Their show Retail X serves the retail industry. And it was just really interesting because one of the themes that was kind of quite heavily accelerated by the pandemic in the retail sector was ding, ding, omnichannel. So what they meant by that was the ability of the customer to move very seamlessly between different ways of interacting with retail. So you might visit a store to speak to an expert, you might then place your order online or get some further detailed information online, and you might go and collect that in the store or pick it up curbside and make a further purchase when you're there. And so they described omnichannel as meeting the customer where they're at. So rather than putting the customer in a static box, you know, this is my live participant, this is my virtual participant. What I saw was, does that mean as events we can allow somebody to move through virtual and live experiences backwards and forwards almost at the same time? and particularly with that same consistency of brand experience. So imagine a store like Macy's. If you go to their website, you're receiving their brand. If you get a delivery driver come to your home, you're still interacting with the Macy's brand in the same way as you are in store. And how could we create those really interconnected omni-channel experiences within the events world? And really what does underpin that is the data. What these retail brands are very clever at doing is collecting more and more data on us about how we like to be interacted with, and then they can personalize the experience to us. And if we can break free of data silos, we can start doing that as event and community brands as well, and start personalizing based on the way somebody interacts with the content that we maybe make available online, to help personalize their real life experience when they come to the event and after that as well. So yeah, I thought omnichannel, and particularly that definition of meeting the customer where they're at, really resonated for what we need to be doing with data as event practitioners as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. And I think, maybe for people that aren't sort of that data savvy, is there ideas of sort of platforms or places that people could start of, this kind of central repository where they could start to manage and manipulate that data to deliver the right message at the right time? I'll pass that to either of you.
Yeah, so I think it's if you're looking at an omnichannel approach, I guess it's taking data out of being event specific. So what was the average at this event? What was the total number at this event? And finding a single point of truth for a customer as an individual. And that might happen in a CRM system. It might happen in your marketing platform. Or it might happen in an analysis tool like Explori. But just finding where's the best place for you as a business to aggregate all the information that you know about that customer and their experience, so you can start tailoring. So yeah, it's that shift from event level data to individual level data.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Sophie. So understanding what platforms we're using and then how the content's being delivered to your customers, whether that's physically or digitally, like you said, is important, because then we can start to look at maybe that first step of how we're capturing that data, registration typically. And I can't see the comments at the moment, but if you have comments or questions about, registration, maybe some of your bugbears with that, please do share them and we can try and discuss them in a minute. But Baris, you were behind an initiative at ITE, I believe it was, to start a sort of standardization of the data that you're capturing across, multiple shows. So maybe give us a bit of an overview of what you did there.
Yeah, when I was heading up digital and marketing in ITE, and ITE used to be, Hive was called ITE for those who do not know. And it was a business that had around 200 events around the world. And some of the markets that we would operate in were not very digitally, let's say, advanced markets. Some of the, let's say, Middle Asian markets that we were operating, or maybe Far Eastern markets, did not have a lot of the, let's say, infrastructure in third parties that we would commonly have in the UK or even the USA. This meaning the type of registration provider you would easily find in the US or in the UK, you were not able to find the equivalent type of company in some of the territories that we would operate in. So therefore, we had to build something. So we went on and built our own registration platform. And by doing so, that gave us, let's say, ability to look at the whole company whilst we were building this. And we went on and we defined, let's say, a very minimum set of must-ask questions at registration level. So for IT, when we were done, this was live over, I think, 18 different countries and up to 100-something shows. The data that came in from registration was standardized. So we would know name, surname, email, all the information that you want to reach the people. Then the first question for every show in ITU was, and I believe still today is, when you go to a Hive show and try to register, you'll find the same system working, and it will say, why are you coming to the show? And there were 5 set answers to this. I'm coming to buy something, I'm coming to sell something, I'm coming to just socialize with people, I'm coming to learn, And I'm just coming for personal reasons. So we will classify you from question 1 if you're a buyer or not. And if you're a buyer, we'll then ask you, what is your decision-making power? Are you a sole decision-making or a joint decision-making person, or are you an influencer, or are you not at all? And then, how deep is your purse, and how big is your company? So all these profiling questions were preset and let's say mandated from the center and with the system, and I would call this the tyranny of the system. That's the best way to standardize something. Have we all not heard the term? The system says no when you're trying to do something out of it. So our system said no to our people, and it was designed to say no to our people. So therefore, we did reach a point whilst I was living a few years ago. All the data of all the shows on registration were comparable, were joinable if needed, and transoperatable. So this gave us the ability to really deep dive into drivers around how we would enlarge audiences and cross-pollinate audiences, and then do much deep dive marketing solutions for our clients if we wanted to. So that was something that really enabled IT to grow its business back then.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's something James very kindly mentioned. We're shortlisted on the Event Tech Live startup competition, but it's something that we very much looked at. Thank you. But that we sort of looked at with Twigged as well, to try and standardize the data capture that's coming through, but also taking the guesswork out, so that when you do have new members of your team coming in, launching a new event or something like that, it makes things easier. I know a lot of companies have kind of created these complex taxonomies, but it is still, you know, a massive pool of information they have to try and select from to build their registration. So, Sophie, on the next round of buzzword bingo, we started talking about psychographic data. So not just demographic data. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that means?
So I think a lot of organisers are very good at collecting the demographic data, and it's your classic registration data. You know, what's your job title? What sort of budget do you hold? What region do you come from? What sector you're in? But psychographic data is where things get interesting. And as we move from often these kind of time-bound 2-day, 3-day live events to these kind of more always-on community-style platforms, there's a real opportunity here to use psychographic data and really think about psychographic data as, what do I think? What do I feel? What are my fears? What are my challenges? What are my passions? And it's interesting because you both mentioned the registration process being the starting point of capturing that data. I would argue now there's the opportunity to capture that data from well before that, because it's very rare that I would hit a website, land on the registration page and register to go to the event. There will be other things going on that drive me to make that decision to register. And they're perfect opportunities to capture psychographic data about me. You can hear some squeaking going on in the background. I've got a puppy who has very strong views on data silos, so he's joining in at the moment. He might make an appearance if everyone's lucky. So really, if you think about the content that you're putting out there, often it can tell you something about the person who's interacting with that content. So if you have a webinar that's called GDPR for Dummies, you can guess that the people who come to that are worried about GDPR. They're perhaps only starting out in their knowledge journey, their information gathering. But if you put out a white paper going, you know, the things that even GDPR experts don't know, you can make some assumptions that the people who consume that, and especially if you can get kind of read data as to how far they get through it, actually GDPR is perhaps a much bigger part of their role. They're perhaps the lead on it in their company. Their level of expertise is much higher. All those things are helping to funnel that person, as you know more and more psychographics about them, down a more personalized and a more tailored route in terms of the content and the experience that you serve them next. Now, you can make assumptions from things like Google Analytics and read data, or you can actually ask people in pop surveys and inexperience surveys to find that out as well. But imagine if you're layering psychographic data along with demographic data in terms of how you're serving exhibitors leads. the puppy's losing his mind at this. It's the most exciting content he's heard all day. But yeah, so psychographics, really interesting to start building from your data, but super powerful if you can layer them on top of your other data to improve your experience.
I feel like the puppy needs to make an appearance, Sophie.
I can't catch him though, he keeps running away. Gonna get you.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, okay, so it all sounds it sounds wonderful, but with someone that's kind of maybe just getting into this kind of thing, maybe Baris, you could sort of tell us, where can someone start to look to do this, or what can they use to sort of start to pull this together, or if there's any tools maybe you could recommend.
Well, I would recommend just go on the VSEF website and just download the format. It's free. Just type some details and you'll get the whole thing. And in there, even if you don't have the need to really export something at that scale or depth, just look at the KPIs that we've listed. Just look at the data points that we've listed, and that will give you a very good idea on because that came from a panel work with 14, 15 of the world's biggest organizers. And this is a version 1. It's in no ways perfect, but it's a good start. So it would give you a good, I think, head start in understanding what are the things to look at when you look at that list of, let's say, variables that we might be tracking. And once you're at it, you might want to really correlate that list or any other list that you come up with between the systems that your user ends up using, i.e. registration, website, platform, or email tool or survey tool. When you touch people, what are the names of the fields you're using? What are the fields you're enforcing? What are the fields that are optional? And just live your customer journey from the customer's shoes. I had the pleasure of working with Denzel and Marco before they published their book, Reinventing Life, and I came up with something that they chose to include in the end of the book on a checklist, yeah, on a checklist around digital, and it's very super simple. And that was aimed for CEOs, and let's say you're a CEO of a company that's like a small events company. When was the last time you registered to your own event? To your own event is the question. When was the last time you joined your own event with using that platform? You should live the customer interaction, the customer journey from the customer side if you're really serious about your customer journey. And that will teach you a lot. And same for sales. When was the last time you sat down with your salespeople and looked at their screen as they were selling? Yeah, and this is not the systems. They were seen as IT work, right? The CEO wouldn't be interested in IT work. Yeah, just sort it out, system. I don't care. I just make it work. So that is something of the past. Needs to be something of the past. I think the CEOs of today and definitely tomorrow will need to be super digital savvy people who understand how systems talk to each other, not even how they look. Yeah. I think a good, let's say, starting point would be to look around at what you're currently doing and really see if it ties together well or not. I think that would be my first advice.
Yeah, and I think it's, you really reinforce there again that standardized approach to everything. But you said something, I made a note as you were saying it, of when was the last time you've experienced your own experience. And I made I think it was in an exhibitor session, maybe last year sometime, but also when have you been to your own event and done everything on that side, but also not just your competitors, like outside of this space, when have you kind of experienced something that was really easy and not just kind of forgotten about it and, a delivery came the next day or whatever it might be, but actually kind of, making note of what made that experience so good and how you could apply that into your event space, for example. So the next part, we've talked a lot about sort of attendees and how we can start to do things with their data, but I want to talk about sort of exhibitors and sponsors and how data is being captured to help us generate, greater returns, or rather prove greater returns or prove the value of their investment. So maybe Sophie, you could talk. We talked a little bit about actionable insight based on this data, and if we have a standard approach to that data capture. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what people can do with this sort of data that they're receiving?
Yeah, I think meet Jarvis, by the way, who has very strong opinions on these kind of things. I'm going to put him down now because he's not helping me data capture by nibbling me. Yeah, so if you want to look at how to optimize the event experience that you're creating, standardized data it really underpins that in such an essential way. Because if you want to be able to compare one event to the next, have you improved, or one event in your portfolio to another, or one event with your company to another, if you're capturing data in lots of different ways, it becomes really difficult to answer even kind of basic questions. So what does good look like in terms of number of meetings participated in? If you measure meetings differently in each of your different platforms. So if you can get standardized data, from event to event, you're capturing the same things in the same way, you can start to layer your static data. So remember we talked about the facts and the figures, your dynamic data, what's happened during the events, with your sentiment, your customer experience data, and actually start to look what elements of the event experience have driven the impact that you want to create. What were you setting out to achieve with this event? Was it to create connections between buyers and sellers? Was it to galvanize people around a particular thought or idea? What elements of that experience were creating that impact and what elements were detracting from it? That's really, for me, the goal in terms of how data can drive event design, but it has to be underpinned by that data being standardized, because really if you're just looking at kind of isolated, siloed data, it's not really going to tell you all that much about the kind of wider performance of the event.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the top tip there for organizers to sort of really understand what they want to prove, and then or what they've committed to with the sponsors and so on, so they can come back and select the right data.
If you're looking at the kind of trade show world, trade shows can be very similar because they are, for the most part about connecting buyers with sellers. But really, if we're looking at all sorts of different types of events that might be internal or externally facing, there's often a kind of a unique goal behind that, a behavior that they're trying to drive, or an emotion that they're trying to elicit. So having that end goal first in mind when you're looking at kind of all the data that you've collected and the analysis you're doing, it really helps if you're looking, okay, did that make me more successful at achieving my goal or less successful? And I think even in trade shows, setting out with an objective of that an event, an impact that they want to create, and measuring success against that actually is a really powerful tool for kind of changing customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to add something to that, Matt, if I can. Very quickly. I think that's a great point, and I think there is also a cost to acquiring data, or measuring something. And if you set out about, hey, I want to measure X, Y, Z in my show, and my question would be, what are you going to do about it? If you're not going to do anything about it, then just don't go through the development cost or the operational cost of actually capturing it, if there is no end goal of using it. And I have seen many times event teams say, oh, can I capture X, Y, Z, getting excited about the ability to do something. And I would ask them, okay, great, maybe we can, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to treat a section of your audience differently because they behave in A or B way? If not, then forget about it. And I think that's a very important thing to bear in mind, the end use of the data capture.
It's a really good point. It's from some of the products I used to sell, and looking at the technology that you could deploy at live events to start capturing things. And it comes back to that understanding the why and the what, and then does the value sort of match up? Like, does your own ROI match up with the investment of the technology, doesn't it? Yeah, so good point, Baris, thank you. And so then looking at a couple of takeaways, we're coming up to the end of the session, where do we start? If you haven't done anything yet to maybe start building this experience, I guess you're actually at quite an exciting stage, because people can map out the entirety of that journey, can't they? So maybe, Sophie, a top tip for someone that's starting out on this process, where do they begin?
I think, yeah, like exactly like you said, is creating a map that shows you where those points of truth are for your customer. Where are you delivering that experience because they're interacting with your content, with your website, with your registration platform? Create a map of that, understand what platforms are contributing to that and what fields. And that then puts you in a position to start saying, okay, where are those different? Where are the disconnects? Where are the silos actually existing? And start to look at what your through routes forwards are. Because, yeah, if you get the data in a standard format right from the start, your whole data journey or customer journey becomes a lot easier. But I think, yeah, you've got to map it, visualize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Baris, for those of us that are still figuring out maybe the traditional 2-day event and how they match that up to virtual or a more year-round kind of model, what can they start to do to maybe improve the existing sort of journey that they have?
Well, I think there's a very if they should log on to their Google Analytics right now after the session and look at their traffic in a year. And it is just a physical event. I've done this for more than 100 shows, and I mapped them all to each other, and they're all the same. Yeah, before COVID days, when we were doing just face to face. Just flat. 8 weeks before the show, pick up. Oh, the day before the show, you just break the record, and the day that the show opens starts to go down, down, down. Show is done. It's 0. Yeah, and that is, just have a look at if you're in this situation, yeah, you need to think: is my brand strong enough? Is my brand ready to become a 365 brand? And most probably the answer is no. Yeah, so you have to start building things into your experience that might give you the brand permission to try to become a 365 brand. If this is your situation today, don't say tomorrow we've just become a 365 brand because our CEO sent an email to our employees. Not going to happen. Yeah. So you need to win. You need to earn this position. You need to talk to this audience and move from an audience to a community. They're not the same thing. Yeah, and there's a huge gap between an audience and a community, and has specifics that make it a community. That people have things to share. People feel they belong. People have some say in its governance. Yeah, people have some say in the content, and there are individuals. It's not just me shouting at you. So it's a very different ball game to become a 365 brand. Not only on exhibitions though, for everything. So basically, you can start by looking at your Google Analytics account and see where you stand.
Yeah, it's good advice. And I think maybe, Sophie, also we talked about how going from that 2-day event, and it's exactly like Baris said, this kind of very simple spike over those 2 days, but it de-risks the ability, I guess, to capture more data. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
absolutely. I think whilst you could capture a lot of data over a traditional 2-day event, it did limit what you could do, and your opportunities to create personalized experiences were quite limited because, like Barry said, you start capturing that data in a relatively short period of time before that event. I think as we expand out and many have the ambition to become more content rich, more community led businesses, the opportunity to capture data really grows, and the time to do something with that really enhances the customer experience grows alongside it. So it's about saying, okay, what do we know about this person already that can allow us to serve them better in future?
Yeah. Fantastic. And we're going to come on to some questions in a minute, but perhaps to summarize, understanding your customer journey and the standardization of your data touchpoints can really create those truly, I guess, seamless experiences that we're all so badly chasing, whether that's, the visitor or the exhibitor or for the organizer themselves. Baris and Sophie, thank you very much. I've been texted a question because I couldn't see the live ones. So I'm gonna read out the text one to start with. But how can you weight data from interactions across channels as you collect it?
Weight?
Can you weight?
So I think what this person is asking is, and we face this challenge even when you were talking about different event platforms, that they'll have a like or an upvote or a chat function, and it can be slightly different in each platform. So what I think the question is how do you know what value to place on these different types of interactions? And that was a challenge the working groups faced on VSEF actually, how to kind of cluster together similar enough types of interactions that you could meaningfully compare them. So we did look at kind of the difference between a face-to-face meeting versus a chat message versus those kind of like upvote functions, and kind of ranked them accordingly. Similar enough type.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just got some feedback there, so I lost you for a moment. But okay, so then the next question I had, perhaps Baris, talking about data, do you see any difference in collecting data between live and virtual?
Well, of course, in virtual, the data is collected for you by your platform already, or because they've built it. Yeah, it's about extracting the data and using it. But on live, or I think they mean on site. On site, I don't think, if you think of your digital platform as a venue and compare it to your on-site venue versus an online venue, the online venue, as everything is digital, will give you an export of whatever happened on those 2 or 3 days. The on-site venue will just send you the bill afterwards. Yeah? So you have to make sure that the on-site venue has got some sort of systems. We looked at this. I mean, it's really hard to do with beacons or other wearables and stuff like that. The penetration of those technologies on a live show floor never go past really, or very seldomly go past a meaningful number. So therefore, you have to extrapolate from a finite set of interactions what actually happened at your event. But on virtual, you can track everyone. So that's the difference. And it's going to be super, super hard for an on-site event to produce as much information as an online event. So there will always be a gap, I believe, between the two in terms of data points created. And that's the nature of that's the nature of the business.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think the permission of live events organizers now to be a data black hole has just gone away. I can't see that we'll roll back to a situation where exhibitors have experienced the level of data they can get through an online event and go, yeah, it's fine, you can send me a spreadsheet in 3 weeks' time with half of the data redacted, and that's meant to be my leads. I think there's going to need to be a real leap forwards in terms of what live events offer in terms of data as well. And of course, that connected experience, it's got to talk to each other. Yeah.
You know, I've used those analogies quite a few times in the comparison of digital to physical, for example. It's like the proof of being able to spend your money on whatever Facebook advertising is there before you've even spent the money. So I think maybe that transparency part coming through of clicks, views, impressions, relatable in the same way events, maybe that's going to be one of the big changes we'll see going forward as well. I'd like to see, I should say. Okay, so that is...
I doubt it though.
I think we're maybe another pandemic off that happening, perhaps.
Fingers crossed.
But so I think James is coming back into us in a minute, so I hope there'll be
Paul out of my ears.
More questions. Hiya, James.
Hello. I have some questions, I have some comments, a couple of things. First of all, on a tech point, can we please set up the hashtag data silo dog immediately? Data silo dog, I think we need to set up, and potentially an Instagram account for Jarvis, who is now officially, as discussed off air, the new mascot of Event Tech Live USA and Canada 2021. So everybody out there, yes, Jarvis the dog has now been promoted to an official capacity. Hashtag data silo dog, everybody, if you've got dogs who are particularly monitoring data at the moment. Matt, I know that you've taken a couple of questions from Glisser that have been sent to you directly. I just wanted to check whether or not you'd seen the one talking about data. Do you see any differences in collecting data between live and virtual? I know that was a clear part of the discussion there, but you know, any further points to add in terms of the difference between live and virtual?
Yeah, I think just as you were coming on, Baris very kindly talked us through that one as well.
Excellent, fantastic, that's great. Multi-channels, again, this dovetails back into a conversation that that took place earlier today and part of a conversation that took place yesterday. There's this huge encouragement at the moment about multi-channel interaction and events maintaining themselves over 365 days a year. Any sort of further complications that's going to potentially add to the whole data question as people really do start to plough more out in there and encourage interactions with their audiences and their communities all year round?
I mean, is there any sort of complications of that data? I mean, I think it gives us opportunity to capture more, to deliver better. You know, if we can really start to profile people and use data profiling in such a way, I think we can understand what really interests people, so that when you're building event programs, for example, you kind of know what your audience has been building up to the main event, let's call it. So I think it creates a even greater opportunity to provide a better experience, definitely.
I suppose one thing that you know, every event organizer will have not difficulty with, but considerations with, is when they're putting their content program together is who to target that at. Do you target it at everybody? Do you target it at a few people? Do you break down your audience into specific vertical strands? I know that's something that we do, and we try and filter content based on certain strands and areas and subjects that people may be interested in. And I guess the more we understand the data that we've got available to us, the better we can make that content more relevant. Content creation is something that's constantly discussed, but I suppose content creation is nothing if you're not delivering that content to the right people and to the right audience. I'm getting nods. I'm getting nods.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, it's really interesting. As a content platform I'm working on at the moment, and, you know, with their regular newsletters that they're sending out, they kind of do about 80% of the curated content specific to the interest of that individual, but they leave the other 20% for that moment to discover something new. So it's like they really are tailoring based on an interest, but there's still that opportunity to find something else and actually trigger to see if that is of interest and relevant to that person down the line.
Absolutely, and I should say once again, as we wrap up this particular session, congratulations to Matt and the team at Twigged for making it onto the shortlist as one of the 3 finalists in the Event Tech Startup Competition. And if you don't mind me hijacking the last minute of your session, Matt, to plug that final, because I know that it's something that you're gonna be looking forward to tomorrow. The other 2 finalists are VI Events and Canopy, along with Twigged, who are going to be presenting their pitches to our panel of judges as part of the final of the Event Tech Startup Competition USA and Canada 21. That's on our program tomorrow, so make sure that you look out in the schedule on tomorrow's program where that final will be added, and there'll be a few minutes put aside. If you've watched it before, it's pretty quick fire, it happens pretty quickly, and we'll have our winner decided in a matter of minutes from our panel. Right now, it brings us right to the end of time. Matt, thank you very much for putting today's panel. Thanks to both of you for joining Matt today and for an engaging session. Please do connect with all of our panelists via the Event Tech Live event platform. You can find all of our presenters and all of our speakers within that platform, and you can extend these conversations beyond the actual timings of the session by connecting with them. But for now, guys, to all 3 of you, thanks very much for your session. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks very much, James. Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, Baris.